Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. This is the last installment in this fall special edition mini-series of WARF's Essential Topics, which is commemorating our 90th anniversary. And I'm Carrie Tomey, the Director of Investments. WARF was established in 1925 as an independent foundation that served as the private nonprofit patenting and licensing organization for the University of Wisconsin. At WARF, we invest in research that makes a difference, and we do this in partnership with the campus through a series of activities that we collectively refer to as the cycle of innovation. And I think I'm supposed to go. Is that slow enough for you, Michael, or am I talking too fast?
What do you think?
Okay. This fall's 4 forums have explored the 4 pillars of this cycle, which we have up there for you. And it all starts with research. On October 14th, we heard from the UW faculty on the rationale for basic research. And then research leads to discovery, and often invention by campus faculty and students, and that is when they pull in WARF to help, okay, this is a tough sentence, so bear with me, determine if what they have developed is patentable or otherwise protectable and of commercial interest. And that was what we talked about on October 22nd. And of course, commercializing the innovation becomes another very important and, increasingly complex part of the equation. Taking new technologies to market through licenses with industry partners benefits the campus, the research community, Wisconsin, and the world. We discussed that with our industry partners on November 2nd. And finally, there is investment, and that's the focus of this afternoon. The endowment was set up 90 years ago and continues to provide an annual grant to the university. The grant is an investment in the future of innovation, groundbreaking research, and investment in the state of Wisconsin and the world. This year, WARF granted the university $59 million for the academic year. That includes $9 million for faculty recruitment and retention, $12 million went to graduate fellowships, and some $11 million was dedicated to the fall research competition, which is a century-old tradition that draws on hundreds of research proposals from 120 different departments each year. This year, $5 million has been provided to the UW 2020 WARF Discovery Initiative, which I know Carl and Marsha will be sharing details on later in the program. Over the last 90 years, the inflation-adjusted cumulative value of the grant provided to the UW is $2.3 billion. These are investments in research, in people, in programs, in bricks and mortar, but always with an eye on how to see the future of our great public university and how it serves the state and the world at large. So that's my intro, but before we move on to the program, I'm going to introduce to you Kevin Walters, and Kevin is a doctoral student at the UW and writing his dissertation on WARF. He's going to share a few words about WARF's partnership on campus and why it has been a part of our past, present, and future to believe that investing in research makes a difference. There you go, Kevin.
Okay, let me get to the... Right, so in the previous three presentations, I talked about how the mission statement for WARF includes each of the parts of the cycle of innovation. We begin with research, we have discoveries, we have commercialization, commercial uses, and then today we're going to focus on this sentence, which includes the term provide funds. So I want to point out that this is entirely, that whole from article 2nd down the bottom, that's all one sentence, and it's actually a colon, so there's like, the sentence keeps going. So that's 1925 for you, I guess. Right, so this session we're going to talk about the end there, which is to stimulate and promote and provide funds for further scientific investigation and research within said university or colleges or departments thereof. There's provide funds. So I made a joke at the first one that provide funds, investment is the name of that part of the cycle of innovation. It's the only word that's not explicitly in the actual mission statement. But then I went and looked, and actually in 1975, WARF restated their articles of incorporation to exclude in more explicit terms how the endowment works. So you have subsections 2 and 3 here. So you notice that the first part is pretty much similar to what they had. There's a little bit of simplification of the language, is a little bit shorter. It's still all one sentence. And you'll notice we added the Morgridge Institute for Research in there because Morgridge didn't exist at that point, and that has been added in. But also, these 2 bullet points were added here. It still doesn't say explicitly the word investment per se, but they do give a much more specific outline of how WARF's endowment operates. The foundation manages and funds, you see that in subsection 2, to pay out and distribute the corporation's funds to promote, encourage, and aid in the performance of the foregoing purposes, and then it administers grants to the university and to Morgridge in subsection 3 to use and administer gifts, grants, bequests, and devices. I think that's devises, not devices, for the benefit of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Morgridge Institute for Research. But in the beginning, there was no endowment yet, and the research apparatus at the university was still quite new. So when it came time to provide funds, WARF's founders had to develop a strategy from scratch, and it turns out their actual mission statement did not anticipate the wide variety of needs the university would face in the following decades. So in that way, we can think of provide funds in the same way that we think of promote the general welfare in the preamble of the US Constitution. I'm a 20th century historian because they have typewriters. I don't have to read this kind of language. So hopefully you can see that that says promote the general welfare. So just about everybody agrees that the government should do something about the general welfare, but we've been arguing with each other for 225 years about what that means exactly. Should it be Social Security and Medicare, or a high minimum wage, high taxes, universal health care, or maybe something like corporate subsidies, low taxes, and minimal regulation? We're not entirely sure what that's supposed to mean, right? So in the same way, in a similar fashion, there's always been a debate inside WARF and between WARF and the university about what providing funds should and does mean. So fortunately, unlike the government, that debate has yet to spawn any wars, international crises, or something like Donald Trump. But the negotiation and evolution of the WARF strategy has led to a long and growing list of ways that the foundation has provided funds. So I'll show you a list of those things. You have licensing and commercializing patents, grants and fellowships, building an endowment through stocks, bonds, and funds, operating a control lab. I put past for any of these that WARF no longer does, but in the 40s it actually owned a control lab to help administer the Steenbock patents and would do a lot of marketing and labeling of things like that. You have purchasing real estate to enhance UW's footprint, including the Dells. Buying land to conserve Wisconsin natural beauty, that's actually more appropriate to the Dells. Purchasing mortgages to buy university infrastructure, to build university infrastructure. Funding and construction of new buildings, manufacturing vitamin concentrates, administering the financial estates of prominent alumni and faculty, which UW Foundation does more now. Taking equity stakes in faculty startups, providing venture capital for emerging technologies, sponsoring research competitions, supporting the Morgridge Institute, hosting lectures and other events like this. And this is an inside joke. For those of you that know, there's a bag of cucumber seeds in the attic of WARF. We're not entirely sure where they're there, and I assume it's for the apocalypse. Right. So to explain why this got so diverse, I think it helps to actually go back and talk about the state of the university in 1925 when WARF was founded. The University of Wisconsin has existed in some form since 1848 with the state constitution, but many of the things that we think of today as the defining characteristics of UW came much later. The Board of Regents issued the Sifting and Winnowing Statement in 1894. It was in 1904 that President Van Hise articulated what would become the Wisconsin Idea, and it was only in 1919 when the Research Committee was created to administer what were called the number 9 state funds. Number 9 was because it was the 9th bullet point in the state appropriations. Prior to that point, the legislature had given specific funds for specific projects, but it was only in 1919 when they first said, here's a chunk of money, the university can decide how to spend that, and the university created the University Research Committee for that purpose. And that's only about 6 years prior to when WARF was founded. So by the time WARF came around in 1925, the modern research university that we all know and love had only just emerged over the prior 20 or 30 years. And everyone was still trying to figure out what sort of research a university should be doing, who should be paying for it, and how it all should be organized. So as soon as WARF started making grants to university in 1928, its founders had to immediately figure out where and how they could contribute. And here's a couple quotes that explain to you what they came up with. This is Tom Brittingham. Appeals for funds from our colleges and universities today are increasing in number and amount. Additional funds are needed, but just as important in these times is the prudent investment of existing funds, and is not a prudent man one who is realistic under today's conditions. So there you see the explicit mention of investment, prudent investment of existing funds. And it was Brittingham, who was the son of Tom Brittingham Sr., who was the one who had donated the Abraham Lincoln statue on Bascom Hill. It was his name that's Brittingham Park, things like that. This was his son, and he inherited that money, and then it was his job to spend that money. He also became a WARF trustee, and he was the one who devised WARF's investment strategy. And he was the one who determined that WARF should invest that money and should grow it, as opposed to just giving it all away right away. You also have what Harry Steenbach said in his investment guidance letter of June 13th, 1928, in which he first told the trustees, hey, look, we're about to start making some money. We should start thinking about what to do with it. What he said was, when considerable funds become available, I realize that the use of such will become a problem requiring the greatest discretion and diplomacy. The foundation should be in no haste in respect to permanently delegating the distribution of funds or any of its other powers. So he's advocating a deliberate use of funds, not just giving money to wherever it comes in, to whoever wants it, but to actually think about where can WARF be most effective and how should that money be distributed. So I think we could restate these two parts as how to make the money, as Brittingham described it, and how to spend the money, as Steenbach had. And these also match up with those subsections 2 and 3, the new ones that I showed you from 1975 and that still exist today. Subsection 2 is about managing the money. Subsection 3 is about how do you give it away. So Harry L. Russell, this led to a process then that was codified after 1928, in which the trustees would decide how much money to give to the university, and the research committee would then decide how that would be distributed. Harry Russell described this as WARF's job is to earn the money and give it to the university. The professor's job is to spend the money as wisely as they know how. It was WARF President George Hay to put it a little bit more glibly when he said, we take the money to the university doorstep and then we turn and run. So these are by design, both of these quotes are by design meant to simplify the process and paper over some of the complications. And of course, it's been a 90-year process. The details about who spends it where, who decides, is it a research competition, is it an annual grant, is it the Morgridge Institute, is it university houses, is, those kinds of things. It's all kind of complicated. This is meant to simplify it. But I do think it sets up today's presentation pretty well by giving us some questions to ponder. Where should we invest in university research, and how should we do it, and who should be doing it? In what ways does WARF invest in the University of Wisconsin-Madison? How can the university maximize WARF's investments, and how can both WARF and UW plan for the long term and not just for the immediate term? So with that, I'll turn it over to today's panel. Oh, to Carrie.
All right, I'm back for a little bit more. So before we introduce Brad and the panel, there was some housekeeping items I've been told to let you all know. The first is that this session is being recorded, as this forum and all 4 of these prior ones are available on WARF's website if you guys want to go out and do this again. And because we're recording it, if you do have a question, they're going to ask you to wait for the microphone so that you can be duly recorded and heard by everyone. And all of these sessions have ended with a networking reception just out there, so we're going to ask you to pick up a name tag if you don't already have one, and then please stay and join us after. So now we're going to move on to the program, which is moderated by Brad Schwartz. And Brad is the CEO of the Morgridge Institute for Research, and he's going to be leading the discussion with Marsha Mailick, the UW's Vice Chancellor for Research and Graduate Education, and Carl Gulbrandsen, WARF's Managing Director. The topic of tonight's forum is investing in research, making a difference. So with that, I will have everyone come up here. Thank you.
You have to sit between us. You sit here. After we're done with all this, I want everybody to stand, hold hands, and sing Varsity.
Well, let's see. Can everybody hear us? Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. I think this is a really interesting topic, and it's important for the ongoing partnership between WARF, the University of Wisconsin, and the Morgridge Institute for Research. So what I'd like to do is introduce a couple of questions, more than a couple, and ask both Marsha and Carl to share their thoughts. So to start with, when we talk about investing, usually people think about investing because you put something forward because you expect to get something back. That's generally the framework in which we use the word. But when we talk about investing in a major public research university, one of what we call the R1, the top types of research universities. So what kind of investment return are we expecting? And so Marsha, from your perspective, helping to orchestrate the research enterprise at this wonderful university, what is it that you expect to see as, say, the top 2 or 3 yields on this, on the investment that's made?
Well, we can think about many, many, many yields on our campus for the past 90 years, but one would be obviously the return of investment in research. That research is conducted, fundamental knowledge is generated, and sometimes that fundamental knowledge goes on to have some kind of practical benefit. And we've seen that happen at our university over these many years, where research that was supported by WARF and other sources of support turn into today, contributing significantly to today's biotech industry or other practical benefits to society. So society, our campus, and basic knowledge end up benefiting. But we have to also think about students. And when there's research opportunities for undergraduates and graduate students, the thrill of working in a lab or being part of a field research team or doing the kind of fundamental research that they have an opportunity to do only here, because it is a Research One university, I think is clearly a return on investment that we all care about. Then there's the impact on the Wisconsin economy, right? I mean, we know that the investments made by WARF and by the state and by other sources end up producing dollars that are spent and jobs that are created and startup companies that are created. So there are so many metrics that we can trace the impact of research investment in so many ways. But I'm going to just turn my chair a little bit so I can see the whole audience as well as you.
All right, thank you. So, Carl, from WARF's perspective, you've got 2 types of investment. On the one hand, there's WARF invests funds in the market so that its investment will grow, and that's pretty straightforward as far as what we would like to see the return on those investments be. But what about when WARF invests in the university? When the WARF trustees run over to the stairs of Bascom Hall and leave that bundle of money every year and run away, what is it that they are expecting to see in return for that?
Well, first of all, I would say being at WARF for 17 years, there's little predictability in the market. So I don't know that it's any more predictable than scientific investigation and research. You know, we start with the WARF mission statement. And the mission statement recognizes that there is really an unabiding faith on the part of WARF that funding scientific investigation and research serves the public good. And so really I think one of the returns that WARF looks for is the fact that WARF's dollars are spent in alignment with this mission for the best graduate students, the best faculty, and we trust the research committee to decide how to do that. The word investment, we did some self-analysis at WARF a couple years ago. And one of the issues was, what's a key word for WARF? And what everyone decided was that a key word for us is investment. And it's investment on a number of different, it really touches almost everything we do. It's not just investing in the markets. When we take a technology in for an invention disclosure, our accepting that technology is an invention, is an investment in that invention. Our trying to protect the intellectual property of that invention becomes an investment because it takes a while to get patents and it takes a long time to get it to the market to improve lives. The grants that we give to the university, the bricks and mortar that WARF provides money for at this university, who you're going to choose as a partner to help commercialize the investment, the invention, all these are investments, and they all take a long time. So, you know, the one thing about an institution like WARF is that our investments are investments for the long haul. We don't expect returns the next year or even the year after that. We expect that ultimately this is going to serve the public benefit, and it will work. And if you look over the 90 years of WARF, that's what has happened. And we try to be smart about it, but it's not going to happen overnight. The other thing that we think about at WARF, and it has to do with the long haul, is our investments are not timed to anything in particular. They're strategic. And we trust the university to be strategic with the money that we provide to the university.
Thank you. So as a longtime faculty member, I learned early the importance of the WARF grant to the campus. And this turns out to be a very important cornerstone for WARF's partnership with the university and WARF's contribution to the university. So I'd like to ask us to dwell on this for a moment. So Marsha, can you tell us how the campus uses the funds? And then if you can give us an idea of the impact from your perspective.
So this is a series of cascading investments, right? WARF delivers, WARF invests in the university, and then it is our challenge and opportunity to invest in graduate education and faculty-driven research. And so it is a series of investments that come from the original investment. So what we've done with these resources reflects both decisions made many, many years ago and decisions that we're making newly today. And so about $10 million each year is invested in graduate education, and about an equal amount is invested each year through the fall research competition administered by the research committee that we've been talking about this afternoon. But in this climate, with all that's happening in our state and our university, an additional huge benefit of the WARF investment in the campus is investment in not only recruitment, but prominently in retention of faculty, and that our university has been targeted by other great institutions, and our faculty are being recruited away. And these are individuals, my colleagues on the faculty, who love this university, who've made their lifelong investment in research at this university, and they really don't necessarily want to go somewhere else, but it gets very tempting. And because, it's a process, right? And because of the opportunity, the investment of WARF in that it has made, we are able to provide retention packages to faculty that they end up renewing their commitment to the University of Wisconsin. And I won't go into specific numbers now because it's an unfolding story, but virtually all of the retention attempts that have been made thus far, virtually all of them this year have been successful, and our faculty is stronger because of it. So that is another way that the WARF investment in the university is used to invest in the faculty on an ongoing basis. And of course, we can't ever time a crisis or an opportunity, but this is a time where there is crisis, and I think it's turning into opportunity. So I have a lot of gratitude for that. And then there is something that maybe you're going to ask about in a little while, I'm not sure, and that is a new program that we have, UW-2020, but I'll wait.
That's a teaser, so everyone will stick around. So, Carl, when the WARF trustees make this grant every year, what do they look for in impact?
Well, again, we're not looking for a quick return. I think what the WARF trustees ask, deciding what the grant is going to be to the university and deciding exactly how the grant is going to be used is a discussion that occurs between WARF and the administration, principally Marsha, over the course of a year. And it may be we have certain categories that have almost a historical relevance to it, but they've worked pretty well historically. It's up to the research committee and to Marsha to tweak those. For instance, she mentioned recruitment and retention. That's suddenly become a major portion of the grant. Graduate students, we spend, I think it's about $11 million on graduate students each year. And it's interesting, it doesn't matter where I go in the country, it almost always happens that somebody comes up and they're a graduate of the UW. And they said they received some WARF money. And there was an obituary in the paper this past week of a great man by the name of Amdahl, who was actually the father of what we consider the modern digital computer. And I actually had dinner with him about 5 or 6 years ago. And he received a WARF fellowship that allowed him to finish his thesis. And then went on to do these great things. And he said the money that he received from WARF was absolutely transformative. And it was transformative because it allowed him to get his degree, his PhD in physics. And it's that kind of thing that, I mean, the institution has been around for 90 years, so we've touched a lot of people. But that's the kind of impact that you look at. People don't think about those sorts of things. But for that person, it was a transformative time in his life. And that amount of money was critically important to him. And it helped improve all of our lives and made our lives more difficult with smartphones and everything else. But, so I think the primary thing at the end of each year that the trustees look at is, has the money been used in alignment with the mission? And again, it's this unabiding faith that if you focus on the mission and the money is used to promote, encourage, and aid scientific investigation and research, ultimately that's going to benefit all of us and certainly the university.
So every once in a while, WARF decides to try a new initiative, and there is such an initiative this year, the 2020 initiative, and that's what Marsha alluded to. So can you tell us a little more about it, and what do you hope it will do?
So we named this initiative UW 2020, the WARF Discovery Initiative, because, well, a number of reasons. One, 2020 vision is something that we strive for, clarity of vision. Second, we would like to use this initiative to move the university's research portfolio into a fundamentally different place, better place, stronger place, more creative place in the next 5 years. And that the WARF Discovery Initiative honors the source of these funds. So the way I like to describe this initiative is that it supports the research project of our dreams. I mean, we all know what those are. Those are the ideas that when we wake up in the morning, we think about first, and how can we apply those research questions to the broadest possible goals. And oftentimes those questions are not quite ready for conventional funding mechanisms. They are too aspirational, or they're too interdisciplinary, or they're bringing together ideas that normally get published in different journals and different literatures. Every time I've talked about the research project of our dreams to a group of faculty, they know what I'm talking about. And one of my big regrets of being in this job is I can't apply for one of those because I have the research projects of my dreams. So we asked for abstracts to be submitted by anybody, any faculty or permanent PI staff on campus, so that we could get a sense of the magnitude of the response and what the topic areas would be. And we got about 150 abstracts submitted, and these are generally multi-investigator, multidisciplinary large programs of research that ultimately will turn into submissions for extramural grant support. We're aiming to average around $300,000 per award, but we'll have some that are smaller and some that are larger. But then there were the skeptics who said, well, 150 abstracts, that's easy to submit. What is this going to turn into when the date of the real submission deadline rolls around? And that was Sunday night. And we ended up with 140. So I would say we were thrilled because there is no shortage of great ideas on campus. We're a little overwhelmed to think about finding reviewers and getting this process carried out in a way with integrity and with the vision that is needed to select the very best ideas from this outpouring of ideas from the campus.
I will add that there was very little social activity among faculty members this weekend because everyone said, I'm working on my 2020 application. So Carl, at the start of each one of these sessions, we learn a little bit more about Harry Steenbach and what a visionary he was. And one of the things that I've learned was you never wanted to get on Harry's bad side. And so my question is, what do you think he would think of this initiative?
Well, I'm not clairvoyant. I would hope that he would be very excited about it, but we happen to have. So Hector's not here. He was the last graduate student of Harry. I would have called him up. But the next best thing to Hector, as far as what Steenbach thought and did, is Kevin. And if Kevin Walters would just come up and make a few comments about what Harry would have thought.
So the first thing I'd say is that he probably would have had some criticism because he had criticism of everything. He was never satisfied. And I mean, his main discovery of radiated vitamin D came about because he was tearing apart somebody else's experiment. They thought that vitamin D jumped through the air because they had two rats in the same cage, one of which had been exposed to ultraviolet light, the other one hadn't been. And so they figured, well, it must be jumping from one rat to the next. And Steenbach said, no, you're irradiating the cage and they're eating the cage. That's the problem. And so he basically just said, you're doing it wrong. I'm going to go do it right. But what also that led to him, so the letter that I quoted here, the June 13th, 1928 letter, what he also said in that letter was, don't spend WARF's money on old scientists who just want a retirement package, who just want to sort of sit on their laurels and while away and do nothing. Spend it on the young scientists who are eager, who have something to prove, and even better on the ones...
Did you refer to them as old men that went to seed?
Probably, at some point,
Yes.
I'm sure, yeah.
I read that.
Yes, that's and he also said you should do something that if WARF doesn't have the money to spend $1 billion right away, then it should do something that will advertise what WARF can do and benefit the entire university and grow the university's mission. So I think in that respect, finding people who are capable, their future is brighter than their past, that they have shown promise, and that they're going to show something greater, and it's going to transform the university. I think those are the things that he would care about. So in that sense, I think it's true to his mission.
It's a relief.
That's great. So there are many ways that WARF has made investments over the year, and we saw the list of things they used to do and they don't do anymore, and we're learning about new things. We're also holding this conversation in a building that's the result of a novel multi-party partnership. And that partnership was designed to come up with impactful ways to help the university. The Discovery Building came about because of joint investments from the state, from the Morgridges, and from WARF. And so I'm going to ask both Carl and Marsha, and since I am fortunate enough to work in this building, I'll weigh in on this as well. What do you think, Carl, for instance, what do you think the founders of WARF would say about WARF orchestrating the investments into this experiment today?
Well, I don't know if I would use the word orchestrate. I mean, it was, first of all, with respect to this facility and the creation of the research institutes in the facility, WARF was a little bit late to the table. It really started with the vision of John and Tasha because of something that was happening at Stanford. And John would come to WARF trustee meetings, and he would leave materials on my desk about the Clark Center and the BioX program, and he would say, we need to do this at Madison. And I didn't quite understand why he was saying that to me. I mean, WARF had, we had our things to do, and we were doing it. And we don't necessarily tell the university, well, we shouldn't tell the university what to do. Right? Okay. But at any rate, he was persistent about this. And when the door opened for the development of this site, and the governor was looking for an answer to what was happening in California, John and Tasha came out and offered to provide a significant gift to help make the Wisconsin Institutes of Discovery a reality. WARF still wasn't at the table on that. I figured John had taken it away from my desk because I wasn't doing anything with it. He's now going to partner with the state on this. And it took a while for WARF actually to get to the table and do this. And once we did, it was a collaboration with the state. It was trying to solve some issues that we had at the time with human embryonic stem cell research. It was a recognition that maybe there might be some value of having a private research institute and a common area for people to gather. And so, over just an evolving time frame, WARF did become part of it, and we actually became the developer of it. But I think that in part it demonstrates that when you have an organization like WARF that is relatively small in relation to the large bureaucracy of a public university, we were able to move when we finally did. We had great partners with the university, and the state actually was a good partner in this. They were anxious to see this area developed and anxious to employ jobs. We had a lot of faculty that thought this might be really kind of an exciting thing. A lot of faculty that were kind of concerned about it too. We had some politics to play. So I wouldn't say necessarily that we orchestrated it. We came in, we were able to pivot when we had to pivot. I think it's turned out to be a great partnership. And I'll let you guys talk about the institutes, but I have a lot of fun in the town center here. And when I retire, I expect to have an office over in Steenbach's, a glass of wine, and take some questions and ask some answers, or ask some questions. So that's my feeling about it. I think the trustees feel the same way, and I think that Harry would have begrudgingly have felt the same way.
Well, Marsha, you were the original interim director of WID, and you had a lot to do with crafting the mission and where everyone hoped it was going to be. So in 2006, it was obviously very important. So I would ask, why was it important then? And now that 10 years are under our belt, why is it important now?
So it's 10 years. That's in some ways a long time. But on the other hand, when the discussions were underway about the building as well as the program, one of the very compelling aspects of the vision for the Discovery Building was that it be a 100-year building. And so really 10 years or however many years it is just a very short period of time in this 100-year journey. And I think the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery is on that 100-year journey. It has to be a center that has the program is as vibrant and as long-lasting as the building. And so it's just beginning. I think the mission of the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery is a very exciting mission of bringing technology to bear on problems of human health and welfare. It's a very broad mission. It's a mission that will take us decades to fulfill, but that's okay because, as has been said already, important work does take decades. I think WID is a place where interdisciplinary collaborative work can happen more easily than many other places, and is in the tradition of interdisciplinarity that we hold dear on our campus. And also it's a vector into the entire university whereby faculty and students and researchers at WID can interact with their colleagues who are not in this building so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
So what about MIR?
So
Morgridge Institute for Research.
Correct. So that's a little bit of an inside joke because the initial nickname for the Morgridge Institute for Research was MIR, M-I-R. And for a while, people weren't certain if we were talking about the Russian space station or exactly what. So we've actually changed that, and we just refer to it as Morgridge now, because everybody knows what that is. So a little bit of an inside joke. So the Morgridge Institute is one of 3 components of this building. And I'm happy to say that many people that don't think about this building on a regular basis don't think about the fact that there are 3 components. They come in here to the town center on the first floor, and it does exactly what everybody wanted it to do, which is it brings people in from across the campus and from across the community. And they come into the campus's living room, and they find this a place to interact. They find this a place to learn about interesting things, to think about interesting things, and to have chance encounters, to run into somebody that they didn't expect to run into and exchange ideas and then have something come out of it. And as a matter of fact, a very prominent member of our faculty in one of the sessions that was one of the evening sessions that was held at Steenbach's was talking about her experiences here, and she said, I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, but my experience in the first couple of years here says that this place is better than I thought it was going to be. And she went on to recount all the ways in which it had benefited her, because she had interacted with people that she sort of knew were out there, but she never would have had an opportunity to interact with before. The Wisconsin Institute for Discovery side of the Discovery building are made up of faculty members that stay in their university roles and work in a multidisciplinary center. And the Morgridge side, being private, gives us flexibility. It allows us to do experiments. Tasha Morgridge likes to talk about the Morgridge Institute supplying risk capital for trying new things that are important and that will have high impact on the world and on the university. And that's something that we keep in mind and that we aim for. So the Morgridge Institute for Research works and has its effect because we are embedded in this wonderful world-class university. I generally don't like to use the term world-class because it's overworked. But the fact of the matter is this is a breathtaking place. And we are fortunate enough to be right in the middle of it. And we are fortunate enough to benefit from the energy and the intelligence and the creativity of the faculty members that really make it to the university. So when we try new things, we don't try new things by shooting from the hip. We give a lot of thought to what the possibilities are, and we talk extensively with our colleagues across the university. And this idea of it being across the university is key. I was talking with a dean of one of the colleges now who said, you guys have had a bigger impact than I thought you were going to, because even though there have been cluster hire sorts of things before, those faculty members then go out and get embedded in their universities, in their departments, and the idea of the cluster diffuses out. And it may be that we're new enough in our history, and this is something we have to pay attention to. But when you talk about opportunities and you bring in people from across the entire campus and you bring them into your building, the level of interaction and mixing of ideas is something that we haven't seen before. And so I think that the Morgridge Institute is an essential piece of the puzzle. And we do what we do thinking about all the ways that investments pay off at the university. So Carl talked about an example of somebody who said, I never would have finished my degree. I think that's a perfect example, because if you add up the number of people who could step forward and say that, and you think about the impact on the state, and you think about the impact on our country and the world, the investments that have gone on are breathtaking, or the yield on the investments have been breathtaking. So we think about that, and we try to keep that in mind, keep our mission in mind. One of the things that Carl told me when I joined the Morgridge Institute was, always think about the mission, and that will steer you in the right direction, and I have found that to be true. So I would like to say that this is a new initiative that was undertaken with the goal of continuing to keep the university a world-leading, vibrant center of thought and research, and I would think that we're doing it.
Let me make a few more comments about that. Brad said that we're now 10 years into it. That's a little bit not quite true. I mean, the planning started 10 years ago, but the institutes really have not been functioning for maybe 6 years, 7 years, something like that. The facility itself is working wonderfully, and the facility and the institutes is still an evolving experiment. When we first started planning the Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery, and when John and Tasha and myself and others would speak to the public about it, the rationale for doing this was not, and when I say doing this, let's refer to Morgridge Institute for Research, was not to try to privatize the university. We did feel that a private research institute within the university could provide some flexibility. The rationale was to make the university more competitive. And I always used to say it wasn't to make a great public university private, it was to make a great public university greater. We wanted to make it more competitive. And it is an experiment that's in the making. When we were building the facility itself, we hired a organization out of Boston called Project for Public Spaces that helped educate us on what we needed to do with this town center to make it a public space. And the one thing I learned from that is that it's 20% architecture, it's 80% programming. So WARF does program the building. Laura Heisler's here, her staff does a terrific job. It's hard work, but it's getting results. And it has become a place where people congregate, and it's exactly what we wanted. The institutes, the collaboration that they've had across campus are incredible, and we are working on the collaborations they have among themselves. Institutes have gone through leadership changes. We've got Brad and we've got interim
Chris Bradfield.
Chris Bradfield. And they are now working together. I think 10 years from now, we're going to wonder, why didn't we do this 10 years earlier? It'll be great.
That's great. So we've talked a lot about the relationship between WARF and the university that's gone on for over 90 years. And this implies no small amount of trust that must exist between the two entities. So I'd like to ask first Marsha and then Carl, ways that trust has allowed us to work together and yield some innovative and successful investments.
So that's a good question. I think when there's funding, such as a grant from the federal government or a gift or a grant from a foundation, there's the donation or the award of the grant, and then there's the spending of the grant. What I've experienced with WARF, not just in my role as Vice Chancellor for Research and Graduate Education, but in previous roles over the past 15 years, is that there's a pretty intense and thick dialogue between the trustees of WARF and the university. That dialogue ends up shaping the process and the outcome, and I think it is a dialogue that builds trust. So it isn't just that WARF makes the money and the university spends the money. Maybe it was like that 90 years ago, but I would say now that the opportunity to have this back and forth with the trustees, with the staff, with the leadership of WARF, and counterparts on campus is really unique, and it works very well. I have to say that during some of the most difficult times that we have faced in the past year at this university, in the current climate that we're confronted with, the opportunity for me personally to talk with alumni who serve as trustees and to see how much they love the university and how hard they work for the university has been inspiring. And I think for them, the opportunity to hear from faculty and graduate students at how their investment in our university has made a difference on an individual level as well as on a more campus-wide level, I think has made a difference. So I think that's how trust is built.
So when people ask me about the relationship between WARF and the university, I often say it's more cultural than it is legal. We've been working together as partners for 90 years. It's been a spectacular success. It really has. It's the only organization of its kind in the country, in the world. And the relationship between the university and WARF is it's an unusual and it's a unique relationship, but it's a cultural relationship. Marsha said that the trustees are alumni. They are. That's a requirement of being a board member at WARF, is that you have to be an alumnus of the university. We did make an exception for the present chancellor, but that requirement of being an alumnus of the university, these people love the university, and that's the first thing they bring to the table. And when it comes to trust, the people at WARF and on the board of WARF, they don't do research. They don't teach. Some of them may have taught in their past, but we have to trust the university when we give the money that they're going to spend it wisely. We certainly can't predict what is going to be the best research to do, and that's not WARF's job. We have to trust the university. And I think the university has to trust that we're going to have the money when we say we're going to give it to you.
I do.
So I might observe that that trust has given rise to some of the more spectacularly successful endeavors. And I'd like to think that the 2020 initiative will be added to that list. But I think about the cluster hires. I think about David Ward coming up with this idea and knowing that he could go to his partner and talk about it as partners and work with WARF and know that the result would come out being even better than what he came up with at first. And I think that history says that was a great example of the two partners working together and having an enormous impact. So I think it's been very fruitful.
So I would say the cluster hire program has transformed this campus, and it continues to. And so I think that the ongoing commitment of WARF as well as the UW Foundation to the cluster hire program is something that I'm really thrilled about.
And as I have many colleagues who are here because of the cluster hire program, I think we all are. I think that's terrific. We all have colleagues that are there. So all right, let's move on. When we think about investments, we are thinking about the future. And in addition to that, we're thinking about how do we manage these investments in a way that we can consider risk. And so I'd like to ask if we could think a little bit about the risks that might be out there, the future challenges that our investments are going to face. And so, Marsha, what do you think that some of the challenges are that face the UW's research programs?
Well, I would have to respond with cutbacks in federal funding for research are probably no doubt, the single biggest challenge that we face, and everything else pales by comparison. And there is no shortage of really important research questions. There's a shortage of money, and that is a challenge. And as a result of that, young faculty researchers who would love to devote their life to this work see risk, and we want them to see opportunity. And that is, I think, the biggest challenge that we face today.
So, Carl, WARF has to consider those as well, but WARF may also see some challenges insofar as it being able to continue investing in the university. Are there threats that WARF sees as well?
So there's a lot of external things that happen. I mean, in the markets, obviously, we can't control what goes on in the overall economy. We try to invest strategically so that over the long haul, we'll still be able to grow the endowment. But frankly, the biggest risk that we suffer is as Marsha said, the lack of funding to the university, but also the negative rhetoric that we've heard with respect to the university. For WARF, I think the biggest risk we face is that the university is not going to be able to attract the level of faculty that keeps this as a premier research institute. I mean, obviously the research and the investigators that are here and the ideas they come up with, that's our seed corn. And if that becomes less than the high quality we have right now, we're all going to suffer, and WARF in particular will suffer. So that's the biggest risk we've got. We need to help educate our legislators and everybody else as to what a crown gem this is and why investment in the university should continue and why they should be proud of it and why everybody in the state should be proud of this place. The rest of the United States also.
Great. Thank you very much. I think the time has gone quickly, but we would like to give time for members of the audience to ask questions. And so we have a couple of folks with microphones. And remember, we're recording this, so please wait until a microphone arrives before you ask. Okay. And so if I could ask you to introduce yourself and identify who you would like to answer your question.
Sure. Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm John Nice. I'm Managing Director at Venture Investors. This is really both to mostly to Carl, but also to Marsha. You've talked a lot about investing. A lot of it has been really from the perspective of the philanthropic goal of the foundation in giving back to the university to invest in research. But there's also the portion of the investing of the endowment in business enterprises, and certainly a lot has changed. Starting with when Jim started a company and you started licensing to startups out of this university. You've backed our firm as we've backed a lot of companies, and you've co-invested directly in a lot of these companies. You could invest anywhere and get a return, but clearly there's a recognition that these investments have other benefits, generate royalty, create the next generation of philanthropists, help you retain faculty that it's entrepreneurially minded students come here. Other stakeholders benefit, jobs for students, tax revenue back to the state, and so forth. To what extent do you try to capture all of these other ancillary benefits associated with your endowment investment activity? And then, is this at all used as, when you choose to make those investments, is it at all evaluated as a part of the total return in terms of the ability to make total mission impact? And would you even, to take it one step further, even consider a concessionary return, maybe a slightly below market return, if in fact you had other measurable parts of return that actually resulted in a superior return?
Could you repeat the question, John? I'm just kidding. Clearly we're not ignorant of the benefits locally that occur from WARF's investments, but I am a little bit more, I get a little bit more serious about it, that investing in faculty startups today is almost a survival strategy for WARF. Because when I first arrived at WARF, we could more easily license a technology right out of the university to an ongoing concern, to a large company. Today you can't do that. I mean, it's very difficult to do that. And yet we have this mission to get these technologies utilized. In the charter it says that it gives us the authorization to use a means of machinery to move these technologies to the marketplace and improve lives. And so today, we have to do a lot of development on campus, and then we have to shepherd the development into a startup on campus. And when you're at these early stages, the best place for that technology to get developed is here, because it wants to be close to the researcher that came up with it. If you send it to some other state, you may lose a researcher. You don't want to do that. But you also, I mean, it's both a practical necessity to do it here, but it's also, it becomes a retention issue too. We have faculty that come in that want to start companies, and they're great faculty, and we want them to teach here and to do research here. So, you know, it's a survival issue that WARF faces, and with your help through venture investors, you guys have been really loyal, and hopefully we'll get some more venture in town here. And I think, frankly, as far as startups are concerned, this has been the most exciting time that I've ever been at WARF. There's a lot of buzz in this community, a lot of great things happening, and WARF has done a lot, but you know, we're not selfless about it. We're doing it because we think in the long run this is going to help us overall move these technologies to the marketplace.
If I might add something, I think it is in keeping with WARF's mission to make those investments, because the thing that sets the University of Wisconsin-Madison apart from the other universities in the state is this is where students can put their hands on the machinery of creativity. They're not just learning bodies of knowledge, they're out there creating new frontiers. And that used to take place almost exclusively in the university labs, and now it spills over into the startups. And students go out and work there, and that's part of their environment. And that's part of what makes this such a special place, and it allows us to continue attracting the best students and keeping the most vibrant environment. So I think it all fits.
Yeah, and often it's the graduate students and the postdocs that are really moving into the company and making it successful, which is great for us. I mean, we want the faculty to stay here at the university. But if we can keep these bright grad students and postdocs here, that's just going to help build this ecosystem even more.
Yeah, the title is the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation. Is there a role for alumni research that is not faculty research in the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation? Or does it have to go through the faculty to be part of the process?
Well, the charter allows us to work with alumni as far as handling technology that alumni develop. We have had alumni gift technology to WARF that's already been licensed, and we get an ongoing royalty stream from it. You know, we're happy to talk to alumni, answer questions. If there's something that needs to be protected that the alumni has, they'll have to follow the same rules that everybody else follows with WARF, which is that technology has to be assigned to WARF, and we'll enter into a memorandum agreement with the alumni person. Very little of that happens, but it is in our charter to do that.
Hi, my name is Gabriel. I'm a PhD in nuclear engineering. I'm also a WARF
PhD
ambassador
in what?
in nuclear engineering.
Oh.
A question for Brad. So if I understood well, the Morgridge Institute was created to take advantage of benefits of being private as compared to being public. So how do you check that it's doing well? What kind of metrics do you use to make sure that you're taking advantage of that in terms of, I don't know, funding, patents, maybe?
So that's a very good question. It's actually something that we're still trying to hash out and figure out exactly what those indicators should be. So what the two things that I would say come up as being the most important are that, as I said before, we can take chances. We can take, and I don't mean to say that our investigators would be reckless, but our investigators can take what we like to call well-advised risks. We all know that research leads in a direction, and eventually you get to the point where it is compelling that you can continue this project, but you're not so far along that federal funding is a slam dunk. And in an environment where everyone's always worried about whether the legislature is going to come out and ask whether you're using resources wisely, being a private institute allows us to say, this is the right thing to do. We want our people to be in a position to take that advisable risk. It's not reckless. They're not doing something without a lot of background behind, but it's something that they can do with more freedom than somebody in a public setting. The other is, if there's an opportunity that comes up, we can move much more quickly to take advantage of it. So I think there's a number of different metrics that we can define as far as our overall performance. But if we hone in on that component of the Morgridge Institute, which is its private status, I think those are the two most important things. We do pay attention to those things.
Hi, I'm just here. I want to make a comment basically to say thank you. I'm a member of the Madison community. I've lived in Wisconsin all my life. If I hadn't taken advantage of this being the university's living room, I thought that was a wonderful characterization. The magnitude of what goes on here truly is the crown jewel. My hope is that the university will do a better job informing the citizens of the state of what's going on. Had I not come, I can't tell you how many times I find myself in this room. And if I wasn't here, I wouldn't know everything and have heard everything. It really is a wonderful story. Work hard to get it out there, and you'll have much more success, I think, with regard to convincing the members of the legislature and the politicians that it's really important to continue this. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just also say that, first of all, we share your sentiments. And we talked about the three parts of the building and the living room here, the town center. One of the missions of the town center is, with support from everybody in this building, is to help inform our society about just these things. So we have a very vibrant outreach program. So we're hoping to do it.
You certainly do, and it's wonderful.
Thank you. One last question, if we might.
Yeah, thanks. This would be my question, I think probably mainly for Marsha, although anyone's welcome to it. What are your points of view on the question of whether or not the university should permit classified research? Should that be changed or altered? My own opinion is that I think it's a good idea not to be doing classified work, and if anything, I think the standard should be tightened even more.
Well, first of all, the University of Wisconsin has always permitted its faculty to conduct classified research. Nothing has changed as a result of recent state legislation. Classified research has to be conducted in the context of a certain kind of environment because of its nature, its inherent nature, and we don't have that kind of environment on campus. So if a faculty member chooses to travel to a facility that can support classified research, there's a process by which that faculty member needs to follow a process to make sure that graduate students are
Just a minute, let me hand you this. Why don't you?
My mic went out.
Yeah.
Graduate students can carry on their research without prohibitions against publication, that faculty members, I think I'm okay, faculty members who are, there's no collateral restriction on faculty members. Obviously, our university has been committed to open dialogue, open processes, publication of results, unfettered. And so there's a very, very, very tiny footprint of classified research on this campus. It's legal, and there's a process by which we monitor it and approve it. I think that was the last question.
I think so. I think the fact that our microphones are beginning to go to sleep and that Marsha and I had to do the public speaking version of buddy breathing tells us that I think we probably ought to get ready to bring this to an end so that we can then talk further at the reception. So thank you all very much for your attention, your participation. Carl and Marsha, thank you. This was a terrific session. Thank you.
Thank you.